Hello everyone, just real quick, I've got a bit of a headache today. In fact, I actually have a really bad headache today. So I'm gonna do this first of all. Maybe that'll help. But in addition to that, I'm just gonna kind of power through the next session here really quickly, so if you'll forgive me. But I really wanted to get these videos recorded as promised. Headache or no. So, last we left off, there's two events actually that happened before the party finally decides to leave Holtberg and head up towards Janwall. First of all, they hear from the announcement. The lady Delicia of Lightmane goes ahead and who is the lady of Holtberg goes ahead and gives out a massive announcement that goes out to basically every signpost and every light post that's in the entire city. Obviously designed for this kind of thing, to get a hold of everyone at the same time. I should close this. I'm getting distracted by it. There we go. So she announces several things while she's doing this. The first and foremost is, of course, to mention that, the party are not war criminals and to formally remove any of the charges against them as per her agreement with the group. But she goes a little bit further than that. Give me just a moment. I'm going to actually pull up the announcement, which I really should have done earlier. Sorry. I'm just going to read it to you, if you don't mind. Good evening, citizens of Holtberg. I apologize for utilizing the emergency broadcast system, but I felt it the best way to inform you the heart and fiber of our city and nation without worry of speculation, rumor, or misunderstanding. Excuse me. Hang on just a sec. And then I had to split it up because while this was happening, the rest of the party was talking with Bagan about the mirror key, trying to learn more about it, and basically getting nowhere. I'll just summarize that. And then we skip ahead some more, as they're still dealing with the mirror key. Back in the inn. They also were talking about a few other things, like, what to do next and how to proceed and blah blah blah. Here we go. My fellow citizens of the metropolis, in recent times we have seen events unimagined. No one wants to talk about the war less than I do, but the Council of Lords and I have been insisting specifically to see what we can do about this and other disturbing events as of late. First and foremost, while we do not condone any action as abominable as war, we will not be swept into the wanton violence as I know many of you have feared, for indeed it is a fear I have held too. But the Council and the High Queen have decreed that we will be opening our borders to the Nevere and the Show once again, and within a few hours of this message the mites who run the hub have agreed to re-establish all connections across the nations. She pauses a moment, a calculated move, as several people watching the announcement applause or cheer at this news, and she was well aware of that fact. Further, we will be opening our borders fully to any and all refugees from this war. Stonehold, Nevere, Show, anyone caught in between. Let it be known that Alluvia is a safe haven for civilization and bonds of fellowship, regardless of other considerations. Now, as many of you know, the Order recently announced that some of their own members had betrayed them in an attempt to incite a war. This is a lie. These people were in fact working with the Alluvian Kingdom and my office personally, and I have no trouble vouching for them on a public level. Her voice grows cold. Now let me make this clear. I am not blaming the Order as a whole for such betrayal. Rather, I see this as a manipulation of the true conspirators behind this and the war both, and all events tied thereto. Surely the Order would never stoop to sacrificing their own. But while I caution forgiveness, let us make one thing clear. As many of you are aware, an Olthoi was on the list of the accused, and anyone who has ever met an Olthoi knows what a slap in the face that is to our friends from the north, and all the work they have done throughout the years to foster cooperation, trade, knowledge, and peace. And the Order, while I have no doubt was manipulated to this, nevertheless allowed this to happen. And as such, all Order outposts within the Holtberg province are being put on watched status immediately, with kingdom oversight in all of their affairs until this situation is resolved, to the High Queen's satisfaction. If any Order officials find this unacceptable, she pauses for emphasis, then they can leave. Thank you all for your time. It is my hope that in spite of the nightmares of the present era, we will push forward as we always have towards another age of peace and prosperity. And then the image winks out. I wanted to read that specifically because I spent quite a while writing it, and that's all I'm going to say about that. Feel free to read into that as much as you'd like. One other event of significance happens as they're on their way out. The The group continues to talk with Bagan about the situation, but basically all they're doing is discussing everything they know and trying to determine their best path forward, and they finally decide that the party wants to contribute to the coordinate in terms of resources, in terms of, backing and that sort of thing. So they decide to go ahead and say, alright, we're going to go ahead and push the exchange, which means we need to go to the local areas and try to reestablish connections with them. No problem. So their first stop is going to be Janwall. While they're deciding this, Hanuel was actually out and about, walking and floating, of course, through the park, and encountered another fairy, who said hello, hi. And that fairy and Hanuel ended up actually having a bit of a dinner thing, and they ended up meeting Z in the process of which, and he revealed that he worked for a group, which I need to actually remember the name of, because my internet just froze. One moment, please. Fortunately, I have other notes here. The Free Trade League. It's a group that Hanuel's never actually heard of, so they don't actually know anything about that, but that's what he mentions, and he mentions that he's going to be on business pretty recently, and he has to get going, but it was nice meeting them. And he leaves. Cador was his name. Now, excuse me, the group goes ahead and decides to leave pretty much that day, fairly quickly. God, I'm still locked up over here. And they head north and northeast toward Janwall. Now, Holtberg, of course, is a port city, obviously, because of the massive docks. But they basically head up along the coast towards Janwall here, which is another port town. But it's a much smaller one. It's a lumber and fishing kind of a village, right? Or city, rather, not really village. And when on their way there, things are rather quiet there, and they're not really sure what to make of that. Now, they do know from rumors back in Holtberg there basically has been no contact with Janwall in several days. Pretty much since the 7th, which would be the day war was declared, in case you're curious. So they're like, not sure what to make of this, but we'll go ahead and see what we can see here. So they go and try to approach it. On approach, basically without warning, several people jump out with crossbows and, say, stop, or we'll shoot. Now, the group tries to talk their way forward, but they do so in the absolute worst way possible, and they end up instigating a fight. The fight doesn't actually go on for overly long. The party does manage to defeat several of them and knock out one of them. And then the party's like, we want to talk, please stop trying to kill us. And then after a bit, they're like, well, who you want to talk to? We don't allow none assassins in here. That's not the accent I used. I don't actually remember the accent I used, to be completely honest with you. But, damn it, come on. There we go. Excuse me. After some discussion, they learn, basically nothing. They have no idea what's going on. They just know that, for some reason, these people are shooting at them. Hang on. I want to find this, because I used a really weird accent for these people. Oh, that's right. I was using the... anybody who's ever played FF8, the guy who plays... shoot, I can't think of his name. Obviously, there's no voice acting. The big bloke, Raijin. I was using Raijin's manner of speech for this guy. And he was like, what you doing? It's not... It's just mad now, Pretty sure they put attack on there that feel like been tiring, just kind of going like that. After a bit, they go ahead and agree, manage to get the group to convince them to let the party in. So they head in, and they find out that this city is virtually abandoned looking. There's nobody out and about in the streets, there's no noise, there's no nothing. They do see several people in several windows who have crossbows. It looks like they're under some kind of siege or something. And when they finally get to one of the larger Arab buildings, which is in towards the middle of the town, they find that the whole place is cram-packed, like literally wall-to-wall with people. And they have to actually maneuver over and through the groups of people that are there in order to actually reach where they're actually heading. And they head their way back towards what is being referred to as the War Room. In the War Room is a somewhat fat, overweight, unpleasant-looking elf gentleman, along with another somewhat plump-looking elf woman. A fairy, another fairy, and a centaur. one of the fairies is, of course, Javan. He's a member of the party who has just recently, well, okay. I guess I'll break character for just a moment here. Obviously, players, real people, coming and going from a campaign is pretty much a reality of D&D, always has been, right? So one of the things I've always made a point of doing is NPCing them and shuffling them off into the narrative somewhere, so that if there's a reason for them to ever come back, that they can do so. And this is how I did it in Javan's case. He went his own separate ways, and I went and told him, here's all the things that happened to you. Java ended up getting associated with the Free Trade League on his way, had a miniature adventure of his own, and is now helping them, in this case, help defend Janwall. Excuse me. The other the other fairy is Cador, the fairy that Hanuel actually met earlier, and he looks at her kind of strangely. And the centaur is Trenarin. Now, I don't say a clan name there on purpose, and neither does she. I'm going to go ahead and give you some out-of-character info, because only one of the party members really got this. I had to explain it to a couple others. I had a one-on-one adventure, which is actually how I prefer to D&D, to be completely honest with you. I prefer GMing just for one person, but we won't get into that for now. With the woman who was playing Fierna Seal, she was playing a centaur who had abandoned her clan Magrum, and left Stonehold. This is several months prior to the events of this campaign, by the way, and got involved with her own little adventures, and basically ended up joining up with the Free Trade League when they were still a minor organization. Helped them with a whole incident, which I'm not going to bore you with, and finally decided to have a greater role in the Free Trade League and try to make them an actual power to oppose the Provincial Trading Company, aka the PTC. So I went ahead, and obviously that campaign kind of stopped because she just didn't have the time or the facility to keep playing, but I decided to go ahead and keep all of those events continuity. And that's one of the reasons the Free Trade League is such a power at the moment. I shouldn't call it a power. I mean, we're not talking at the national level, but it's a thing now because of her and because of her actions. And so the party, runs into her like this. She's already pretty high level, all things considered. She's a druid, by the way. They also encounter Eruth of Moonwhisper, that's the gentleman elf, and Tethelia of Shadowsong, that's the woman elf. Now, as they're talking, by the way, I just got to pause. The whole party was just absolutely astonished at the idea of an elf who was overweight and unpleasant looking. Anyways, so I'm going to go ahead and skip through quite a bit of the information that is dumped in this part. Basically, what the group learns is that Eruth there got really, really lucky 4 times in a row. As he himself says it, he was back in Holtberg. He's actually from Holtberg. He was a part of the Undermarket. And he was what is referred to as a middler. Middler is a whole range of people who basically manage the gears of the Undermarket. Accountants, pushers, sellers, transits. There's all sorts of categories here, but it's all the people who actually make the Undermarket work, basically. And he reveals that he was basically taking some moment off on his shift to fool around in the back closet with Tethelia, the woman right next to him, when he noticed a couple of other individuals enter the room. And neither of them spotted him, but one of them killed the other in cold blood, which absolutely shocked the hell out of them because it just came out of nowhere. Keep in mind, in equivalence, this is the basic of if you're at the office place and all of a sudden one of the guys pulls a gun and shoots someone else. It was completely unexpected, completely out of nowhere. Now, our good friend Eruth here, by sheer happenstance, always keeps an exit materia on himself for himself and for Tethelia. It's an exit 2, so it can always transport the 2 of them. And he always has that on his person, and so in his panic, he goes ahead and activates it. And the 2 of them transited here, towards Janwall. Now, Janwall, of course, as most cities in the entire world are part of the Undermarket as well. And so he immediately rushed to the local Undermarket place to warn them, I don't know what's going on, but there's some kind of assassination attack thing going on. And as he's warning them, one of the people he's warning nods, pulls a sword, and starts attacking the rest of the group. They barely managed to bring this guy down. Again, I just want to stress, in stat terms, this is, several level 0 commoners trying to take down an actual assassin. So it is still a barely thing, and they still actually lose a few people in doing so. Now, they're not really sure what to make of this, but the Free Trade League and Trinaran were already in town trying to work against PTC interests. And so what happens very shortly thereafter is Trinaran, who is has a huge wisdom score and has a brain on her head, not in her head, on her head. It's like hovering up here. She has a brain, and so she decides to go ahead and start fortifying the town now because she has a feeling that things are going to go bad quickly, and she's right. What they learn as they're here is that some group has organized a assassination of all the middlers of the Undermarket across the entire nation, across the entire continent, within the same day. That day happened to be the day war was declared against Stonehold. If you're paying attention, and I'll go ahead and lay it out for you, that means that someone coincided this attack to make it look like the Undermarket fell as a result of the war against Stonehold, when in fact they had probably been planning this for months, if not years, in advance in order to infiltrate every single city on the continent with agents who would be ready to assassinate at a moment's notice and know exactly who to assassinate. Because they left most of the other infrastructure intact. The people who actually make the goods, the people who actually do the selling, the bottom and the top of the organization still exists, but with the entire middle chunk of it taken out, the Undermarket has collapsed completely. And if you're paying attention as well to everything I've been saying, you understand that that means the economy of the world has basically just been destroyed. And it will take a great deal of effort and work to rebuild it, because the economy of all of the four nations was sitting on the Undermarket, which now no longer exists. So, sure enough, not too long after, several of these agents start to assault the town. Now, the first assault on Janwall was pretty carelessly planned, because they probably didn't expect to have any actual opposition, but it is worth noting that they were coming to burn and sack the entire town. They were willing to destroy this entire town and everyone in it to get rid of the survivors of the attack, which is Eruth and the individuals he saved here in Janwall. I just feel like pointing that out to get across the intentions of our enemy here. Now, they were pushed back, and for the last, I believe it's 6 days total, they have been under siege, and occasionally, periodically attacking. Now, they haven't attacked in almost 12 hours as of the point at which the party gets here, which Trinaran believes means they're going to they're preparing for one final push. Now, Snarg agrees with this, because Snarg gets really upset, and he doesn't understand why the military hasn't been involved. Why hasn't Alluvia come to save him? And then he stops himself because he realizes the Council of Lords has been in session for the last 6 days. Awfully coincidental if you think about it. And so they haven't done anything, and that's also probably why they're going to do their big push soon, because the Council is not in session anymore, and that means there's going to be an official government response soon, and they need to move fast if they're going to take this town out. Now, the party agrees to go ahead and help, because, what else are they going to do? Sorry, see ya. And they go ahead and move their way as they're hanging out. They decide to send out a couple of scouts who, coincidentally enough, encounter several of the advancing forces of whoever it is who's attacking this place. The assassins, we'll call them for now. Now, basically, if you could picture the town here with the coast. Well, actually, the coast is over here, but whatever. For me, it's over here, but I guess it'd be here over here, the east side here. Here's the coast. They send several people to scope this out, several people up here and several people up here. They encounter quite a few individuals, kill most of them. One of them gets away. I mentioned that because that is still significant even as of now, at the part at which we're in the campaign. Food for thought. Anyways, one of them gets away, and the rest of them, so one of them starts ringing the bell in the center of the town very wildly, and the two groups out here are like, oh my gosh, what's going on? After they've had their battle, because the group over here has noticed a ship coming in. It is about frigate-sized, it is fully armed and armored, and its cannons are ready to take this town out. Now, the way this worked was beautiful, because basically, I actually mapped out buildings on the grid, roughly, of course, and said, okay, the ship's in this general direction. You're over here, what are you doing? And the party had to be extremely careful about moving around, because, because anytime the cannons got sight of the party members, they would fire. And those cannons did roughly a huge amount of damage. Actually nearly killed a couple of party members, including Caladrius. So, it was this wonderful battle. Forgive me for skipping through this, but this is probably one of my favorite grid encounters that the party's had so far, was fighting the onslaught of the enemy forces and, of course, the ship which was bombarding them at the same time. Now, the way they dealt with this is they were hunting down the assassins that were attacking one by one, trying to keep them busy and doing this whole very guerrilla warfare thing through the buildings. It was a lot of fun. But what two of the party members did, Snarg and Zeiss, both swam out. They went under the waves. They had to take very specific routes to get to the water without getting shot, of course. Got under the waves and started swimming out to the boat. And they started sneaking their way on board. Now, Snarg was probably trying... I don't know what he was going for exactly. Or maybe it was Guido. No, I'm pretty sure it was Snarg. Anyways, they were trying to find some kind of peaceful way out of this. Zeiss had recently procured the mirror key that I've been mentioning so often lately. Well, what Zeiss ends up doing is he starts crawling up after the boat, and then he pauses to do nothing. Now, this is funny because this whole plan up to now was brilliant to the point where I was willing to let it go, and I had an idea of where he was going with this. But, hang on just a second. I had an idea where he was going with this, but then he stops. He pauses rather than taking action. I don't remember why. I think he was trying to see what was going on. But as a result, they spot him, and they're all like, "Oh my god, kill him!" And they start climbing over the thing to come after him. And Zeiss is like, "Okay, I will fight them." And then he immediately gets injured and loses his weapon, and he's like, "Okay." And what I'm trying to say here is that the party as a whole was about 2 rounds away from TPK, basically, because Zeiss had paused. So he decides, as an emergency action, to go ahead and grab the key and fling it overboard. And by overboard, I mean onto the ship, onto the bridge where the captain happens to be. Now, because I was in a generous mood, I didn't do any of the rolls to make this happen, other than making sure it got up there at all, which it did. So the key goes clattering up there, and the captain leans down to pick it up, and as soon as his hand touches it, all of them vanish, every single one of them. Now, Snarg gets really upset at Zeiss about this. In fact, a lot of the party members do. Because if you recall, the party was under the very strong impression that aside from the massive amount of evil that was radiating off of this key, and the fact that it was some kind of abomination, non-elemental energy, one of the things they wanted most was to get people to experiment on, whoever the key bearers are. So Zeiss probably just condemned those, whoever these assassins were on this ship, and all of them, by the way, because it caught every single one of them to an inhuman, horrifying fate. Zeiss stands by his decision. So do I, for that matter. But they go ahead and decide to search the ship, and they find nothing. They were basically almost out of rations. There is nothing to explain who they are or what they are. There is zippo there. It's just an empty ship with the ammunition for the cannons and the barest amount of resources in order to keep functioning, which is probably also part of why they were in a bit of a rush to attack now. On top of that, well, I guess that's it, actually. I'm sorry. So they managed to succeed, yay! And they go ahead and head back to the town, and they reconvene, and they do have a couple of prisoners. And they try to go ahead and examine these prisoners. Now, these prisoners have these strange rings on them. And I say strange because these rings are not woven, but nevertheless have some kind of energy about them. So despite the fact that they're not magical, they aren't actually... They still have what I would call magical properties, if that makes any sense at all, which probably doesn't. And that's kind of the point. The party has no idea what to make of this. So as they're examining them, they're like, okay, well, I don't know what to do with this. And so they start trying to question them. They basically learn nothing. They only learn 2 things. One, the obvious, that these people were across the continent, hadn't all been sent to kill the middlers of the Undermarket in order to basically assassinate the Undermarket and the economy of the world while they're at it. And 2, they get a name. Now, this is a name drop, but it's a very specific type of name drop. It's in writing terms, when you do a name drop like this, the drop doesn't mean anything the first time around. It's there so that when you hear the name again with context, you have something to put to it, if you understand what I mean by that. So what they give them is the name of the Viosians. This is the first time this name is ever mentioned to the party. They have no idea what it means or why, but they say, there's no reason to try and contest the Vyotians, because they're everywhere. And all of these assassins are killed by some kind of device that's within them, and that's attached to those rings. They're all dead, every single one of them. Now the party decides that having done all of this stuff and having saved the town, which they're rather pleased with, it is in their best interest to immediately leave Janwall and go over to Riffholm to the west. Now I'm going to go and cover Riffholm in brief, because they didn't actually spend much time in Riffholm, but I just found that hilarious, that after having just barely survived this assault and having just barely done anything, they're like, alright, let's go, da, 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 and they just leave. So they leave. Javan goes with them. They leave behind, Trinaran and the Free Trade League, and they're like, yeah, whatever. Oh, they also kind of mentioned that they would like to lay claim to that boat, but obviously they're going to need a crew and a ship and all that stuff, so they'll have to figure that out later. So they leave and they head west to Riffholm. Now, the Riffholm is a bit more of a lumber mining town, mostly populated by dwarves and elves, and they learn that nobody's willing to talk to them about anything at all. They actually spent quite a while. I'm going to just skim over this, but they spent quite a bit of time trying to talk to the locals, or the craftsmen, or the mayor, or the sheriff, or anybody, trying to get any information on how to talk to them, and everyone was clammed up. Nobody was talking to anybody. This is going to be another name drop scenario here, sort of. It's actually more like a concept drop, but bear with me. Finally, they get someone to talk to, and he basically says he'll go ahead and lead them to the local faction leader. The local warlord is what is the concept drop, because, well, I'll just skim ahead. What they learn. Okay, the next day, they go ahead. Actually, I'm skipping over something. I'm sorry. As they Zeiss, as part of his attempt to convince the town to talk to him, dropped the fact that he was a member of the Bloodied Flock, which is the assassins group. Now, he's not. He actually is no longer a group with them. But, but he does get their attention, put it simply, because when he and Snarg go to sleep, several thugs enter the place to try and kill them in their sleep, because they believe assassins have come to kill them. Now, what's hilarious about this is Snarg is constantly trying to convince them that the flock, that they're not with the flock, and they're not here to kill them. And Zeiss is constantly trying to convince them that he's with the flock and that he's there to kill them. And so between the two, they tend to believe Zeiss a little bit more, and it takes a huge amount of effort in order to actually get them to successfully talk with them rather than trying to either kill them or run away from them. And finally, they arrange a meeting with their leader, the warlord I mentioned earlier. Oh, what was her name? I wrote it down. At least I thought I wrote it down. There it is. Greta! Greta of Firebeard. A dwarven woman. She is warlord of a group that is now calling themselves the Slates. Now, there we go. What they learn in relative reaction to this, I'm just going to, again, kind of skim over what they learned from her, is that, as one might expect, when the Undermarket shattered, and with none of the middle sections of the Undermarket existing anymore, all of the different chunks of it that were kind of organized together anyways all split up into factions. They also learned that there's a very large faction in the southwest that has been gaining in power bit by bit. More on that later. It's not really relevant just yet. But they do learn that there's someone based in Iraq, which is in Nevere. And that person, I actually don't remember his name. I don't think I've written it down yet, but whatever. He is the first one who proclaimed himself warlord, and the term just kind of stuck, and everyone else has been calling themselves warlords ever since. And the whole factionalization thing has been spreading and spreading, and it's basically degenerated into a sort of gang / bandit group / whatever you want to call it. A lot of infighting for power, that kind of a thing. Now, Greta is primarily exporting to the Olthoi, who pay very well because they're Olthoi, and that's what they do. But that's one of the things they do. Zeiss manages to, at length, try to convince her to at least give them a chance to make a trade agreement with her. Just a chance. Maybe. Now, As they're talking with her, they get a letter from Araguna, who's another one of those players who ended up bowing out of the campaign and then, wanted to come back. And so I already had a setup for him as well. He's actually in the town of Marblebush. That's a town that's going to be relevant soon, and still is actually, to the north. And he basically says, "Hey, come check it out, guys. There's some weird stuff going on up here, and you should help. Help." The end. Peace. And so they decide, okay, we're going to go ahead and try our darndest to convince this woman to work with us. They're not even sure if they succeed. They do what they can. She basically says she'll think about it. So the party decides, okay, we'll go ahead and head north to Marblebush. Now, I kind of want to pause on Marblebush because a lot of things are about to happen there, but I am going to give you a bit of a teaser. Any of you who've caught my streams know that I've made, I've poked fun at the party for taking forever to decide what to do in some cases. Let's just say that this next section is probably the most extreme example of that, because they hit Marblebush, and then, for all intents and purposes, they do nothing for over a week and a half of real time as they decide what they're going to do about that situation. So, hopefully, it will not take me a week and a half to summarize it. Either way, I will see you next time.